Here in British Columbia, the province of British Columbia, we actually had people that were doing sterilization, and they were sterilizing what they classified as the below average intelligent human beings, and yet these are human beings, right? And they're playing God with all these people, and at the same time, the Canada is only a population of about 35 million people. We're sitting on the second biggest landmass in all the world. And we're sitting on massive resources that this country could be set for thousands of years yet to come because of all the resources we're sitting on. So what we're seeing right now here in Canada is that, if you ever heard that song Tin Soldier, Canada is a prime example of that right now. We're sitting on the hilltop. We have treasures we're willing to share with people, but they're the few people, individuals who are coming out of Salt Lake and other parts of the United States and other parts of the world who wish to take this stuff from us and not pay us a fair share. There's two companies right now which I've been reporting more than once on this show. One is being Lafarge, the biggest cement company in Canada and United States, headquartered over in France, and then other one being Ashgrove being out of Kansas City. These two companies and a few others are involved with the theft of over billions of dollars from the province of British Columbia in regards to natural resources that are being taken out and not paying taxes on us. This is happening right now in this nation. And yet what happens is when we start talking about it, people kept on saying, well, they want the government to get more money from the government, but they're not willing to stand up and fight for what is ours, the people. And that's really starting to sadden me a lot when people aren't willing to stand up for what is ours as the people, and yet they want people to basically want more money from the government. What's your thoughts there, Michael?
Well, you're seeing a continuation of a pattern which has been repeated throughout history. Certainly the United States has got a tremendously vile record of going into other countries, overthrowing elected governments, putting in a dictator who will then loot that nation's resources for the benefit of American corporations. A classic case, of course, would be U.S. support for Batista down in Cuba. Helped him rig the election to steal Cuba. Batista then turned around and started almost giving away Cuba's agricultural produce to United Fruit and to PepsiCo, and drove his people into poverty for the benefit of these American corporations, and the mafia was down there in Havana until finally it triggered a revolt that brought Castro to power. We saw the same thing back in 1953 when the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government of Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh and installed the Shah. And the Shah basically started handing out Iran's oil to British and American oil companies at way below market prices. So there was no money going to the Iranian people until 1979 when they revolted and kicked out the Shah and put in the Ayatollahs. So this is a pattern that we see over and over again, where the countries that need the resources don't want to pay for them. They figure it's just cheaper to go in there and figure out some way to steal them.
We also have to remember the state of Hawaii in 1893, correct me if I'm wrong, when a U.S. warship entered the Bay of Pearl Harbor and annexed Hawaii at that time.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue out here for those of us who live here in Hawaii. We were a recognized internationally recognized republic or nation rather. And the last two kings had been elected to their office, so we were already in the process of becoming democracies here. And then a group of what are called the missionary families, which were the descendants of the original missionaries who came over and Christianized Hawaii, then they got into the sugar business, and they were very upset that because of tariffs in the United States, the U.S. government made more money off their sugar than the sugar plantation owners did. So they wanted the U.S. to annex Hawaii in order to evade this tariff or tax. And in order to do so, literally stole Hawaii away from the people who actually owned it. And when the annexation didn't work out, they declared themselves the Republic of Hawaii. And then there was eventually a successful annexation, and then Hawaii became a state through an election which really wasn't legal under the UN rules at the time.
Yeah, and also here in Canada, with the religious groups, there's been a couple churches, the Catholic Church, United Church, and Anglican Church, which have been involved with the residential schools. And that's been when the Aboriginal children were put in schools from the 1890s all the way up to about 1984, where over 50,000 children were murdered. Countless others were sexually molested, physically abused, mentally abused. A whole generation of First Nations are now sitting on the streets with drug problems because of this problem. And one of the things I remember reading about this issue was they're trying to tame the savage within. And you're looking at it going, well, who's the savage here? I look at these so-called Christian people coming in here and forcing these people, human beings, into these institutions. I look at them being the savages.
I would agree with you. Absolutely, I would agree with you. And we've had some people from the organizations up there in Canada who are trying to deal with this thing. We've had them as guests on my radio show as well. And it's absolutely true, and there's nothing new with that. I mean, my own family history. Back in Spain in the 1490s, my ancestors were grabbed by these good Christians and thrown into dungeons and tortured into converting. And again, who is the savage here? Who is the primitive? And I'm sure that everybody, every organization, every institution, every religion thinks of themselves as the pinnacle of human culture, and everybody else is going to be a savage barbarian that is not worthy of consideration. And that's just part of the demonization that is attendant on anybody engaged in conquest and empire, whether underneath a religious icon or a national flag.
And also, 2 weeks ago, I had a guest on by the name of Jesse Woodrow, who comes out of Hollywood. Him and I were reading through this Building a North American Community. It's through the CFR, put out a task force. And where it's going to show Fortress America or the creation of the North American Union. He was listing some names at that time, but I'm wondering, I'm a show that I love to list names of people behind this stuff, so that way when the shit hits the fan, us, the people, we can knock on these people's door and say a friendly hello to them, and do you know any names that also may be behind this stuff that, the listeners may want to learn of?
Well, I would say, obviously, just go right to the top and go to the owners of the Federal Reserve System here in the United States, because their goal right now, one of the reasons that they're engaging in these financial manipulations that we're seeing really destroy the economy of the entire world, they want a reserve bank for the entire world. And this is basically, at the end of World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement made the dollar the sort of de facto international reserve currency. Everybody had to take it, everybody had to honor it, but now the dollar is very much in decline. And rather than ride the dollar down into decline, the Federal Reserve Bank, which created the problem by overprinting dollars in the first place, now they want to basically reestablish as a global reserve bank with a new global currency. And so this is what they're pushing towards. And so everything that follows on that, whether it's the Trilateralists or the Council on Foreign Relations or all these other groups pushing for this so-called New World Order, it is all driven by money and the idea that if there's a single global bank, then it is a single global world and it doesn't matter who's making the laws, to paraphrase from, Rothschild. Along with that, of course, we're seeing this push for climate, human-caused global warming as another requirement for a global political control system. It's a global problem, therefore we must have global governance to deal with it. And as you said, Holdren's solution for overpopulation is a global authority. So what everybody is trying to do is they're trying to create all these various arguments why a global authority is going to make everything all hunky-dory, for this really big push to try and establish a one-world government. And, of course, I am very much opposed to this one-world government, simply, for two reasons, really. National borders serve the same function as fireproof doors or watertight bulkheads. If they're closed, if you have a problem in one area, you don't lose the entire ship, you don't lose the entire building. And indeed, the reason the United States financial decline has turned into a global disaster is because of globalism. And so saying more globalism is going to solve it is like saying we could save the Titanic by backing up and running into the iceberg on the other side of the bow. It really doesn't make a lot of sense here. Another reason I'm really opposed to global government is what happens if you get an Adolf Hitler or a George W. Bush as head of that global government and there's nobody there to hold them in check? And it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. Every nation eventually gets a tyrannical, insane dictator at the top. What happens when it's a planetary government and there is nobody there to hold him in check? finally, as long as you've got a lot of little tiny nations coming and going throughout history, social evolution continues to move forward. If you get a one-world government, all social evolution will stop, because that global government will simply consolidate its own power and perpetuate its own self-image forever and ever and ever, and never be tolerant of anyone coming forward and saying, you know, there might be a better way to run human society. So that's the other reason I'm very much opposed to a one-world government.